Two found guilty over a tipper crash that killed 4, including a little girl. The lorry had faulty brakes. Its owner and his chief mechanic were convicted of manslaughter. 4-year-old Mitzi Steady died. The acquitted driver offers his sympathies to her family.
They're constantly in my thoughts. And I just hope. What do you hope for? Just hope they can carry on now.
Also this lunchtime, the Berlin market where so many died is reopened as German police hunt the suspect who slipped through their fingers. Fit enough to fly, a helicopter lands at Buckingham Palace with the Queen and Prince Philip due to begin their delayed Christmas break. And Scotland and the north of England brace for Storm Barbara as the south basks in balmy weather.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Alistair Stewart.
Good afternoon. A mechanic, Peter Wood, and a haulage boss, Matthew Gordon, have been found guilty of manslaughter over a tipper truck crash in Bath that killed 4 people. 4-year-old Mitzi Steady was the youngest. Her grandmother was left with life-changing injuries. The tragedy happened in February last year when the truck, which had faulty brakes, careered out of control on a steep hill in the city. The truck's driver, Philip Potter, was cleared of all charges. Rupert Evelyn explains.
It was out of control and lethal. The 32-ton truck with brake failure. The consequences were devastating. 4-year-old Mitzi Steady died instantly, hit by the lorry as she crossed the road with her grandmother. A few seconds later, and 3 more innocent victims were killed. Stephen Vaughan, Robert Parker and Philip Allen were crushed beneath the truck as they headed back to South Wales. Sian Vaughan was looking forward to life with her new husband, Stephen. Everything changed the night he died.
All the plans, the future that we had together has just all been taken away. When obviously, this was all very much preventable. They've denied us of a family, and especially having to spend your first wedding anniversary alone was just so far removed from the one that we had planned. It's just been absolutely horrendous.
The jury were told that the haulage company that owned the truck was a shambles, and that such catastrophic brake failure doesn't happen through bad luck. The truck was out of control as it careered down this hill, but that was almost inevitable, given the woeful lack of care and servicing that Grittenham Haulage invested in its trucks. Matthew Gordon, guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter. He owned the company, which failed to comply with even the most routine guidelines. Peter Wood, the mechanic, also guilty of manslaughter. He was supposedly responsible for the vehicle, but in truth took little or no care over its upkeep.
What was uncovered was a truly shocking picture of a company culture with complete disregard of safety and maintenance. This was a company with a very casual attitude towards safety.
Philip Potter, the young, inexperienced driver, was found not guilty of all charges and freed, although as he told me, his thoughts are not for himself.
Just that they've never not been in my thoughts. They're constantly in my thoughts. And I just hope. What do you hope for? Just hope they can carry on now. That's it.
Thank you. The damage was done long before the truck lost its brakes. The cost of that failure, measured by unfulfilled hopes and dreams, and 4 lives cut short.
And Rupert, what have those bereaved families of those lives, as you say, cut so short, been saying about these verdicts?
Well, all 4 families have released statements within the last hour. I think, as you'd expect, they all talk about the desperate, heartbreaking loss of their family members, the people they love. But there is also another theme within all those statements that they all touch on. And that is the fact that this crash was completely avoidable. Had Gordon or Wood simply followed the rules, then it is fair to say that these 4 people would still be alive today. And 4-year-old Mitzi Steady's family had this to say within their statement: "We urge all those involved in safety-sensitive industries to ensure they know and follow relevant rules and guidance and report failure to do so to owners and authorities until action is taken." The judge today told the 2 defendants that they face very lengthy sentences and they will be sentenced in the new year.
Rupert, thank you. The hunt for the man suspected of ploughing a lorry into crowds at a Berlin Christmas market earlier this week is still underway as German officials face increasing pressure to explain how he wasn't stopped. The brother of Anis Amri has urged him to hand himself in after it was revealed the Tunisian had been under surveillance and had recently had his application for asylum in Germany rejected. There have been other raids and other arrests overnight and this morning. Sejal Carrier has the latest.
The hunt to find the prime suspect in Berlin's truck attack intensified overnight. At dawn, armed police carried out a series of raids at addresses across the city, looking for clues that might lead them to Europe's most wanted man. This video, appearing to show that suspect Anis Amri, has just emerged. He's still on the run and considered armed and dangerous. And yet 3 days since the attack, the police have still to find him. 2,000 miles away in a small, impoverished village in central Tunisia, his family are now being questioned by local police. His brother Abdul Qadir urged Anis to hand himself in. He said, "I am shocked like every Tunisian citizen when we heard about it. The police came to the house to take my mum, then we knew it was my brother." Another brother, Walid, said, "I just want to blame him for what he has done." It was Anis Amri's ID documents found in the cab of the truck used in the attack that alerted police. A European arrest warrant was issued for him, which showed he used 6 different aliases and 3 different nationalities. But he was well known to the police, who'd identified him as a potential terrorist. Since January, he'd been under surveillance, deemed a public safety threat because of links to Islamic radicals. He was arrested and questioned over a non-terrorist related crime in the summer, but released. In fact, he was a known criminal who fled Tunisia to escape jail, but spent time in prison in Italy. The Christmas market, where 12 people lost their lives on Monday, today reopened, with safety barriers installed to prevent a repeat attack. Nevertheless, many Berliners are scared. Catching the prime suspect might just alleviate some of that fear. Sejal Carrier, ITV News.
And our security editor, Rohit Kachru, joins me live now from Berlin. Rohit, what's the latest that you're hearing on the ground about this investigation?
Well, the police have been raiding homes here in Berlin, also in the far west of Germany, but as yet they have not found their suspect. There's confusion about whether they've made arrests. There are some reports that they have detained 4 people. They're being denied by officials, though. One significant development, they appear to have found the fingerprints of the suspect on the lorry, the same lorry cab where his ID was discovered on Tuesday morning. But it's been reported this lunchtime in some of the German media that German intelligence agencies had intercepted communications he'd made, messages he sent, which appear to have indicated he was offering his services as a suicide bomber, but they were too coded, goes the excuse, to act upon. Here at the market, things have reopened, the shutters are back up. Things look like they're back to normal, but of course things aren't back to normal. We are surrounded by concrete blocks to prevent anything like this from happening again. But store holders here were determined that they had to get to work quickly. And there are some people here who are wondering whether the police have failed to act in the same spirit.
Rohit, thank you. Here and in the past few minutes, a helicopter's taken off from Buckingham Palace, taking the Queen and Prince Philip on their delayed Christmas break. The pair had to delay travel to their Norfolk estate in Sandringham because both had heavy colds. Well, our royal editor Tim Ewart joins me live now from the palace. So, all underway then, Tim?
Yes, I think the health scare, if that's what it really ever was, the health scare is over. About 20 minutes ago, a helicopter of the Queen's flight arrived here at Buckingham Palace, and that was clearly the signal that the journey to Sandringham was going to begin. A few minutes ago, the same helicopter took off with the Queen and Prince Philip on board for a flight that I would guess would take about 45 minutes. Very shortly after that, the Royal Standard, which has been flying here, obviously with the Queen in residence, was lowered to be replaced by the Union flag, which is the flag that flies when she's not here. The Queen, we can be certain, was very anxious to get to Sandringham. This isn't her favourite residence. She would much rather be staying somewhere else, but she'd been here after the annual Christmas lunch with members of the family earlier in the week, and it was yesterday that the health scare began, that it was announced that both the Queen and Prince Philip had heavy colds. It was impossible to speculate then as to how serious that was, but now we can assume that those colds have not gone, or they're at least under control. The Queen normally goes to Sandringham by train from King's Cross to King's Lynn. A helicopter is not her preferred means of travel, but under the circumstances, that was the obvious choice. Christmas for the royal family is back on as normal.
Tim, thank you. Still to come, and the high-tech gift of sight. The NHS offers bionic eyes to patients for the first time. And a tale of two Christmases. Britain prepares for a weekend of weather extremes. But first, in Syria, the week-long operation to evacuate tens of thousands of people from Aleppo is drawing to a close, with aid organisations reporting that tens of thousands of people have now left the region. It's been a race against time to help the remaining residents, with plummeting temperatures adding to their difficulties. Nick Wallace with the latest.
With snow settling on the ground, a ragtag convoy of battered, broken vehicles carries civilians and rebel fighters out of Aleppo. By the time this evacuation is over, more than 200 buses and around 1,000 cars and trucks will have shipped 35,000 people out of the city to relative safety. But now they need help.
It's a race against the clock and against the winter to provide shelter, warmth and relief to people who are sick, exhausted, malnourished from 5 years of war.
This fraught and complex operation is part of a ceasefire deal which allows pro-Assad civilians and fighters out of the nearby Idlib province. President Assad of Syria has hailed this as a joint victory for the Syrian government and its Russian and Iranian allies. Much of the workload on the ground is being coordinated by various aid agencies.
We hope that after the evacuation is over, to be able to reach out for these civilians and to provide the necessary humanitarian aid and to assess their needs and respond to them as soon as possible.
The evacuation of Aleppo is due to be completed by tomorrow, saving thousands but adding to the million-plus Syrians who've been displaced by this conflict. Preventing a further humanitarian crisis as winter closes in will be hard. Nick Wallace, ITV News.
The NHS has announced that it will pay for several blind people to be fitted with bionic eye implants following groundbreaking research. The patients all have inherited forms of blindness, and they'll be given special glasses which will capture light and relay information to the brain, allowing them to regain some sight. Helena Carter has the story of one man receiving the treatment.
Is that the twinkling lights on the tree I can see? How far forward is it? I can see the little lights. Yeah, I can see the little lights.
Keith had been living in darkness for decades. So to see the twinkling lights on the Christmas tree is incredibly special.
Are there any presents underneath for me?
He lost his sight 35 years ago after being diagnosed with an inherited form of blindness. But his life has been transformed by his bionic eye implants.
I used to sit in the pub with my mates and I could be talking to one of them and he'd get up and go to the bar or the toilet and I'd be sat talking to an empty chair. It makes a vast difference knowing where objects are, where people are, instead of just sitting in the dark all the time like it was for 30 years.
Okay, Keith, here we go. If you come forward, just gently place your chin on the chin rest there.
For the first time, bionic eye implants are being offered on the NHS.
And I can see the implant straight ahead of me.
10 people with the same disorder as Keith will be given a pair of the glasses that send wireless signals to an implant in the retina, improving sight and changing lives.
Some of the patients are able to detect colours. Others are able to even read simple words, two-letter words, using the technology. And for many patients, it does provide a remarkable degree of independence.
No, there's a lot of little flickers.
Patients will be treated at Manchester and Moorfield specialist eye hospitals. For those receiving the implants, perhaps there could be no better gift this Christmas. Helena Carter, ITV News.
Well, as Helena mentioned there, some of the procedures are taking place at the Moorfield Eye Hospital in London, and Linda de Cruz is a consultant surgeon involved in the work. I don't know if you're able to hear that, but it was absolutely magic. Keith Hayman's looking at a Christmas tree saying, oh, there are lots of little flickers, I can see it. Do you realise the magic that you people can impart?
Well, Alistair, thanks very much for having us on. We are very grateful to be part of a trial like this. It's fantastic to be able to offer something to people who are completely blind and begin to bring back some of their vision. We realise, of course, the limitations for the patients themselves. They would like their normal vision restored, but this is a really fantastic first step. And the fact that NHS have given an opportunity to roll this trial, which had a good outcome, into the more general community is a really important milestone for those who are involved in the primary research.
And this is specifically about folk who have retinitis pigmentosa. If it works with them, are you as the expert confident it may have wider applications?
Yes, the group retinitis pigmentosa was chosen because it was an excellent group to carry out the initial studies in. It would give us very clear-cut outcomes as to whether the device worked, its stability, its long-term benefits. What we'd like to do is consolidate it in this group where we know there's a good track record from the long-standing trial, and once we've got some experience of working with it within the NHS or within the community, then we can look at broader indications for the device. But for the moment now, it's a fantastic breakthrough for this group of patients who we've already demonstrated it may be of help for, and we'd like to first roll it out in this group of patients before looking at its possible role in a wider group of patients with vision loss.
Linda de Cruz, Christmas for 10 people doesn't get much better. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and for what you've done. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Remarkable people. Now, a Polish mother and her child have died in a house fire in Essex. Emergency services were called to a house in Braintree last night. Our reporter Kate Prout has been at the scene.
The emergency services were called about midnight last night to find the house behind me well alight. Now we know that 2 women managed to escape the building, but sadly another woman and a child were unable to be saved from the burning building. Now you can see fire investigators are on site at the moment. They're going to be here for a lot longer as well, trying to work out how on earth this happened. Some friends and neighbours of those who died have already visited the site and laid flowers. We know that they were a Polish family. They were apparently lovely and bubbly, according to neighbours, and they'll be very sorely missed. What a horrible thing to happen just a few days before Christmas.
Kate Prout reporting for us there. Prison officers have rejected an improved pay deal in a fresh blow to the government as it attempts to tackle the jail's safety crisis. Earlier this month, union leaders endorsed the package, which included a reduction in the retirement age of up to 3 years for guards. But Prison Officers Association members have now rejected the offer overwhelmingly. Around 600,000 extra homes and businesses in broadband hotspots are in line for superfast services, the Culture Secretary has announced. Some £440 million will be used to connect properties in the hardest to reach parts of the UK. And fire crews have released CCTV footage of the moment an e-cigarette battery exploded in the user's pocket, inches from a baby's pram in Leeds. Finally, Parts of Britain are bracing themselves for Storm Barbara. It could cause Christmas chaos with strong winds expected to batter Britain. Fog caused delays to flights from 3 London airports this morning. Scotland's predicted to be the worst hit with gusts of up to 90 miles per hour forecast. But the southwest is expected to experience much milder weather. Sangeeta Kandola explains.
Storm Barbara has already been making her presence felt in the far northwest. Strong winds and snowfall over many parts, bringing with it treacherous driving conditions. But the worst of the weather is due to come into force tomorrow and on Christmas Eve, on what is expected to be the busiest Christmas travelling days of the festive season. 90-mile-per-hour winds are expected and an amber be prepared weather warning from the Met Office. Scotland is predicted to be the worst hit, and so they're preparing.
As Scotland's airline, we've been monitoring the weather very closely for the last few days. The onset of the storm tomorrow means that we've also moved a number of flights earlier in the day and cancelled a small number of flights as well, which we just don't think weather conditions will allow us to fly.
But in the south, it's somewhat of a contrast due to the particularly mild weather. Some forecasters say Christmas Day could reach 15.5 degrees Celsius. Here in Kew Gardens, there are already signs of spring.
We have this warm spell and plants like this think that spring has started, and this is just a little bit early. So we'd normally expect this to come into flower another 5-6 weeks. So this thinks spring started, I'm going to start growing and get maximum. For example, this week here at Kew we've been planting lots of trees and shrubs. It's perfect planting weather and the ground's still warm, so roots are still growing. So if you get your plants out now in the garden, then you'll be ahead of the game in spring.
So potentially good news for gardeners in the south and anyone travelling over the festive period if the weather stays this way. Sangeeta Kandola, ITV News.
And that's it for now. We're back at 6:30. Until then, a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.